I mean, religion is not a hotbed of peace at all. And the suppression of sexuality makes people ready for war.
Sending young men in many cases as well into war with the belief almost that they can't be killed. They can't die in one way.
Yes. And those young men are making war. They're not making love. If they were busy making love, they wouldn't have time for war. I know that's simplistic.
Oh, but it's
simplistic, but it's also true.
Of course, yeah.
You can't do both at the same time.
That's right. So this has been used as a way of conquest, of pretty much conquering the world in that sense. And it's an ancient methodology as well, right?
Yeah. Now, the 2,000 and more years ago, there was the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire conquered the world by conquest, as empires do. But the Roman Empire collapsed, imploded on itself, and got replaced by the Roman Church, which conquered the world through ideas, accompanied by a whole heap of brutality, which isn't spoken about. But when you look into the history, it's absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
And a chunk of that's in my book, with also a list of other books to read, which document even more horrible things. I mean, just to think of the Inquisition. We tend to think, in popular parlance, the Holocaust is Hitler killing the Jews. But that went on for, maybe 10 years. But there was a Holocaust for 600 years, which was Christians, thugs in cassocks, thugs in skirts, going around with full permission, church and religion given permission, to enter a society and set about making absolute hell and burning the people they didn't like at the stake.
Yeah.
A Holocaust for 600 years.
And this was, would you say that took place in most of the European countries? We think about this as, we have the Spanish Inquisition, the Portuguese, the Roman, and then a little bit happened during the medieval times as well. But I'd say that this happened in all the European countries pretty much. Would you agree with that?
It did. Not all the time, but it happened across Europe, going from place to place where they didn't like people and they wanted to squash them. And so on. 600 years of it, and various estimations of how many were killed, but an enormous number.
Yeah.
Murdered is better than killed. Murdered.
That is true, exactly. And the question there.
Also,
go ahead.
Another thing was that when they killed somebody, they were able to take their lands, all their property. So not only did they kill living people, but they also found a neat way to get more property and more wealth, was to dig up dead people and make them anathema, and then they could steal their lands as well.
Yeah, it's
very profitable.
It's incredible.
So, if you think of it as money and power, and so on, and very little to do with God, certainly not anything much to do with spirit. You've got a much more accurate picture than the one that's officially out there.
What do you think in terms of, obviously we're talking about gold, power, money, land, assets here as well, but on top of that, I think it's probably even a more important aspect to this, and that has to do with the extermination or eradication of knowledge as well, because in many cases we're talking about burning of so-called witches and people who actually were into a more shamanistic actually path, if we want to talk about it that. Would you agree on that, Leo?
Absolutely. Witches, the original meaning of witch is wise woman. They were the healers, the herbalists, the helpers, and so on, of the doctors of the old society. And so one of the reasons was to make doctoring a male prerogative. So they called the women, they changed the term from wise woman to mean bad woman, and murdered the women. So they left what is now alternative medicine, which used to be and should be the proper medicine, and they replaced it with mechanical medicine done by men. Through all those days of leeches, for example, and bloodletting and extraordinary medical procedures. With the old joke, the medical procedure was successful, but the patient died. So they set medicine back by, I don't know, 1,000 years. In the early days also, for example, they burnt the library in Alexandria with thousands of books, and they suppressed all sorts of things. So they set knowledge back probably 1,000 years. So I think to say that the religion set the human race back 1,000 years is not bad. It might sound a little heretical in some ways, but it's not a bad estimate.
Well, that's incredible to think about that, because imagine where we potentially would be at this time if we would have developed during 1,000-year period, instead of being right here, not right now. We could talk about this in terms of ecology connected with technology, meaning that we still kind of drive around in gasoline cars today, and what have you. We probably would have been way more in advance, but then we have this interesting kind of so-called scientific progress taking place primarily, I guess, in Germany, when Protestantism pops up on the scene as well. We get the Gutenberg press and things like this. But do you think that it was allowed at that point because it was under the control of the church, so they can kind of build it up from the start from their point of view? Or why do you think they did that?
Well, I think it was out of the control of the Roman Church, because Protestantism, was against Rome. So in a sense, while they're fighting out their power, their war for power, other things can pop up, and a lot of creativity can happen because it's not being stopped. They're too busy attacking each other to stop the creativity. And, heavens, good things happen through it all as well.
Sure. What do you think about, because you mentioned the destruction of knowledge in terms of the, library at Alexandria. We have examples when conquistadors come over to South America and tell the locals there that what you're doing is of the devil, and we burn all the text and things like that. But I always personally held the idea that a lot of information and knowledge actually was absorbed into the church as well. They didn't actually destroy everything, so to speak. They actually hoarded some of this knowledge for themselves. Do you think that could be the case, Leo?
It could well be. It could well be. And then, like the Bible itself, which is selected text from a whole pile of text. There's loads of different Gospels, but they just selected and approved 4. And adjusted translations and so on to the prevailing desire from the bosses, so to speak. The beliefs that they wanted to propagate. So yes, the knowledge will be there hidden away. Lots of things are sure to be there hidden away in the Vatican, but they only let out to the public what suits them. But I don't know. Other people know much more about that than I do.
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect to what do you make of? I guess where the church is heading today. What do you make of that? We have so much now in recent times, and this obviously dovetails nicely with the presentation that you did in Bath, and also during your various workshop, and when you present some of this information, we can see that the Roman Catholic Church is being accused in so many European countries and even in the United States as well of pedophilia and abnormal sexual behavior. It's if you will, then finally coming to the surface in that sense. What do you make of all that?
Well, it's 1,000 years ago, celibacy was enforced for priests, and it's an unnatural condition. And when you suppress a natural force, it comes out in some other way. And of course, that's been hidden for centuries. And now the whistle is being blown on so many things. I think it's wonderful that the truth is coming out at last. And the poor unfortunates who've suffered can get a little bit, they can get heard. Not long ago, they would, if they spoke out, they'd be exterminated.
Yes.